I'm here with Nicola Peel, and I'm very honored and excited to introduce her. Nicola is the winner of the People's Environment Award, and she was Campaigner of the Year. She has spent 20 years of working in the Ecuadorian Amazon. She has been initiating numerous environmental and social projects, just such as building rainwater system, agroforestry to prevent deforestation, and more. And Nicola has really worked very tirelessly on finding solution to environmental problems which we have created. And when we had a chat, Nicola said she's often asked by people, how do you not get burned out, and how do you keep your focus on the environment? And her answer is it's her connection with nature and her connection with the elements of earth, with water, fire, earth and air. So it is also that deep love she has for the earth, and that she really believes that we all need urgently to begin to walk our talk. So Nicola will talk about her own activism, her work as a solutionist, and also about what we can each do at this moment in time. So over to you, Nicola, and thanks already for joining us today. We will also in the chat post some links because Nicola gives so-called Earth Talks, her own talks on different subjects, and they all on Eventbrite, and you can see the links in the chat. Please do ask questions, which Nicola will answer in the last 15 minutes. So over to you, Nicola.
Hello, everybody. So a little bit about just myself and what I've been doing. Well, 20 years ago, I used to be classed as an environmentalist. However, I call myself now a solutionist. Don't talk to me about the problems. I think we really need to talk about the solutions and what it is that we can do. So I have, started in 2000 working in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And when I first went down there to make a film, I traveled from Ecuador all the way down to Brazil, and I uncovered this awful truth about the largest oil spills on the planet hidden away in the Amazon, how ill the indigenous people were. And I just couldn't believe that I had never heard about this. And, so aside from making a documentary, Blood of the Amazon, I also then realized that the number one thing we really needed to do was the people needed water. So I was the first person there to build rainwater systems and say, okay, right here, right now, we need to take action. And, one of my favorite sayings is that action is the antidote to despair. So I could have either gone into despair or denial that, oh, wow, here we have 1,000 toxic waste pits left behind by Chevron Texaco, and the people are really ill. In fact, it's one of the highest childhood leukemia rates in the world amongst children. And, I just couldn't walk away from that. And so that really kind of propelled me to dedicate my time to saying, okay, we need to find some solutions here. Number one is that they stop drinking the stream water and the well water and start to collect the rain. So that was kind of like one of the initial projects that I started up, was building rainwater systems. And I've built hundreds and hundreds of families, most in need water systems. And they come together in like a minga. So they all learn how to build the systems. They come together, they bring the wood, they bring the man and woman power, and together we build them. And it's really important that they know and can build them themselves. And it's made from local resources. Also looking at, the issue of all these spills was like, well, hang on, who's looking at actually cleaning them up? And so I brought the first team of scientists to work on mycoremediation. which is the use of fungi. And it's mentioned actually in the great Entangled Lives book that was just mentioned by Nick earlier. Fantastic book if you haven't read it. And co-renewal was mentioned, or we used to call it the Amazon Myco-Renewal Project. And that project was to bring people to say, okay, can we really do this? Can we use mycoremediation to clean up oil spills? So we got that going. Unfortunately, due to lack of money, we could show it on a small scale, but the scale that is necessary would take a huge amount of money. And more recently, the last 6 years, I started an agroforestry project for the charity Rainforest Saver. And that's been amazing because I can jump up and down, save the forests. But unless I help the local people to find a way of making money and growing more food, then they're going to cut the forest down anyway. So agroforestry and regenerating soil is so vital. And so much of the Amazon has been cut down for cattle. And then once it's been cut down, it's baked by the sun, the rainwater washes the soil away. They can't then use that land for agricultural purposes. So what will happen is they'll just cut down more forest and, keep every 3 years generally is the slash and burn rate, looking for new agricultural land. So this technique that I've been teaching down there is a form of alley cropping, where we grow trees in alleys and the leaves fall off, they break down, they create biomass, the mycelium runs and brings nutrients to the plants that are then growing in between these alleys. They regularly get pollarded. And so, not only are we rebuilding and regenerating the soil, we're preventing deforestation. We're helping alleviate poverty because people can grow at least 3 times more than they could ever have grown before. And so we're having amazing results with, the comparative tests that I set up last year. And after 20 years, last year was my last year, because it's like, okay, all my projects that I've set up, they are all still going. So I'm at a place now, so I don't need to keep flying down there. And, of course, that balancing my own carbon, people will say to me, oh, yeah, but at least when you fly, I'm not flying for a holiday. I'm flying to go and leave the place better than I found it. But still, there comes a point where it's like, actually, we do really have to walk our talk. And that meant for me, however hard, after, I feel like their family, all the people that I work with in Ecuador, and the projects that I have started, which now I'm doing just like this with, people in Ecuador via Zoom and WhatsApp and Skype and everything else. And the projects have kept going. So, you can see a lot more about my work on my websites. So that's really been, over these last 20 years, a lot of my work has been focused on those solutions in the Amazon with the people that most need it. And then here, when I'm in the UK, I'm a speaker at all sorts of events, everything from schools and universities through to Rotary clubs and festivals and anywhere where I'm asked to give a talk. And, that kind of brings me to my work here, which, has taken many threads. And I know something, as this is, based around the work of Stonehenge, was for me to just bring in the amazing work that I was honored to be the translators for the High Priest and High Priestess of Bolivia in 2012. So there was this big talk about the eagle and the condor, and it's just like, well, actually, it did really happen. They came here in 2012 to Stonehenge for solstice. And the year previous, I'm sure those of you that are involved with Stonehenge will know of Frank Summers, and he has this Istana Grove at Stonehenge. He's one of the most learned people about Stonehenge, has been, in dialogue for decades with English heritage. And he is a druid that the Bolivian embassy were asked to contact by the High Priest and High Priestess of Bolivia from the Temple Tiwanaku. Now, they found this meeting had happened, this thread between the Temple of Tiwanaku and Stonehenge, and they invited Frank and Kate to go over and represent Albion, represent the stones. So they went to Bolivia, they had an amazing trip, met the president, were taken to this great solstice ceremony. And then, of course, the following solstice, it was right for them to come here and a ceremony be held at Stonehenge. And so, wasn't quite the same. They had all expenses paid by the Bolivian embassy. They were treated like really special guests. Well, of course, when they came here, there wasn't any help from the British embassy, but our group, we did what was ever needed to take them around sacred sites. And most importantly, what they'd come for was to come for solstice. And so it's like, wow, there we are, 2012, summer solstice, and these two tiny little, indigenous elders who, being the high priest and high priestess, actually the president at the time, Evo Morales, would bow down to them. Here they were. And we were, obviously quite embarrassed at the state of Stonehenge in the fact that many people were drunk and they were on drugs, and this was our sacred site. And for them, it was very confusing. Well, what's going on? How can people be drinking and drugs in your sacred temple? That's not okay in their culture. So it was like, well, also, how do we get into the middle? Because as you know, it gets jammed in there. And so Frank said, well, maybe we'll just do on the ancestors' mound, we'll do a ceremony with them. So I asked them, and they made it clear that no, they actually wanted to be in the center of Stonehenge. And so that was my job, to get them into the center, where the grandmother, Eulalia, she wanted to speak in her language of Aymara. And I was like, well, of course, I can't translate that, but you just speak however you want to. And, it was this very powerful, amazing moment where this, we carried the Andean flag into the middle of Stonehenge there, and we did this ceremony, and, went afterwards to, to visit some other sacred sites around the area. So it was a real honor to be there. But I was also very aware of what this patriarchal energy, this very kind of masculine energy at Stonehenge, not enough women. And, I would feel like I was going as a woman, as my job, going for solstices, as much as I, love being there. So that was a great honor to be their translator and spend that week with them. So people often say, because I am involved in so many projects, well, what keeps you from burning out? What gives you energy? And I think that really, as Krista mentioned before, it comes down to my daily meditation and deep connection with the elements. And it's something that can be so simple as setting aside a little space where people may have a shrine, they may have a religion, a Buddha or a Jesus or whatever, but this can go alongside it, to have the elements represented. And I've got here a stone, earth, some sacred water, a feather, an eagle feather, and a candle, not a tea light, because they're in aluminium and petroleum, which is, So having the elements there where we can actually have them present, honor them, give thanks to them, put aside just 5 minutes in the morning to have that meditation, to remember what's really important and what actually, sustains us. And I think so often we're like on it as activists, and we don't stop to give thanks to life and to the elements, that remembering that, our body is also, earth and water and air. We've got it all happening inside us, and to have that understanding that we are the elements, that, we are this great mystery. This helps us in the energy that we need to sustain this work, that we are here at this time of this great turning, and how we can be of service, and how we can bring, our earth walk. And so often there's this kind of, there's like environmentalists that have, are not in any way kind of spiritually connected. It's all too woo-woo for them. They're, it's like full-on environmentalists. And it's like, I've been in that camp as well. But there's also, you know, people that are on a real spiritual path that are not connected to the environment. So as above, so below, like a tree with its roots and its crown. You know, so we have to be connected to the earth and the elements, and also be in awe of the great mystery that is all around us and we are a part of. So really, you know, my message for everyone is like, keep it simple, but give thanks and start to understand the elements. And, you know, how can we understand the elements? If you think about using your senses, what does the earth, the water, the air, the fire, what does it smell like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? Do you know it? Do you know what you're protecting? So, you know, for us to know what we're protecting, we will protect that which we love. And the more we love it, the more we want to protect it. And so it kind of all goes together. So it's really important that we come to that place within ourselves of not doing it for some other reason or doing it for our own kudos or for whatever else. We're doing it because that's what makes sense. And to be of service is what brings this true happiness as well. So, you know, that's why, like, you know, whenever I've done it in corporate settings as well. I've been asked to give talks, and I set up at the front where I'm talking just these little representations of the elements and bring that into the conversation. It's like all of us in this room, all of us here now with me right now watching, you know, it's like if I was to ask your children, you know, what are the 4 things, 5 things that we cannot live without? How many of us and how many of our children know what, if somebody says, what can you not live without? So surely people are out there on a spiritual path, seeking God, searching this divine connection without realizing, well, hey, you know, it's actually all around us. We're just not taking the time to deeply appreciate and understand that our greatest teacher is nature and the elements. And that's what, you know, one of my loves is biomimicry, which I have been giving talks on as well recently, which is Janine Benyus came up with this term. She wrote the first books on biomimicry, and she talks about it being a conscious emulation of life's genius. Now, what does that mean? And it's like, well, who's the greatest teacher to help us get ourselves out of this mess? You know, 3.5 billion years of evolution. Nature has worked out what works and what works stays. And so when we start to look around at the systems and the functions and the strategies that nature uses and how we can bring that into, you know, this turning, this time of great change, where, you know, yes, we can talk about the doom and the gloom and the them and the government must change and the media must change and they must change and everything must change. Yes, and every single one of us must change too. And part of that, the change that is needed, not only in the evolution of our own consciousness, but also in what do we do? How do we truly walk our talk? And, you know, I think that we need systemic change. There's no one thing. And yes, we need political change. But how many of us go and speak to our local MPs? Not many people. There's no dialogue. There's no communication. If we are the mycelial web, then, you know, we actually really need to use that and spread our knowledge. So often, sadly, MPs are really quite uneducated in some areas. And so when I've had these kind of conversations with councillors and MPs, it's like, really, okay, there's some basic stuff that we need to be helping them understand. So politically, we need change. And that means if we want political change, we've got to have dialogue with them. You know, actually, what about people that are running for elections? It's like, actually, if we want political change, we got to make the change. We need economic change. What is running this planet right now is the money. And sadly, that's how it is. It's like, but I remember many years ago when I was asked to speak at the Occupy movement in London. And I said to everybody, well, hey, I take it that nobody here has their money in a high street bank. And a lot of people kind of looked away. I was like, well, hang on, you're against the 1%. You're against this economic system. So therefore, get your money out of the high street banks, divest, move your money, which is your energy, to somewhere which actually sustains life. I mean, the main 5 high street banks invest in fossil fuels, in nuclear, in all sorts of nasty stuff. So instead, find out about the ethical banks, about Triodos, about the co-op, about, ethical banks or smaller co-ops. So, so we're looking at political change. We're looking at divesting money. Once we've divested our money, well, check in with your workplace and your school and your religious institutions, your churches. It's like, find out how also they can divest. Push your local councils to divest. We need to move the money away from what we don't want and start investing it in the infrastructure that we do want. So that's political. Economical, we need legal, we need a legal change, we need a law, and the law is ecocide. And so we need to name it. We need to talk about what's an ecocide. And if you're not already earth protectors, which I'm sure most people on this call are, it will be the best £5 you've ever spent. It's a minimum one-off £5 donation to become legally an earth protector. That gives you a legal document that says that you are a conscientious protector. Now, how did the guys get out of going to war? They were conscientious objectors to war. Well, we are conscientious objectors to ecocide. So therefore, for us to get that legal piece of paper, which we have paid for, which says that we are an earth protector, if ever you are peacefully protesting against some form of ecocide, you can use that paper in court to the judge. So it's like this is premeditated. You knew what you were doing. You have dedicated your life to be against ecocide, therefore you are legally an earth protector. So go onto the ecocide Earth Protectors website and just sign up and say it's a minimum £5 one-off donation. Be awesome if you can pay more, but hey, and that money actually goes so that the small island nations will be able to pay to send a delegate to the United Nations. So what usually happens? In the UN, one country, one vote. And the little small islands, they can't afford to pay for somebody's hotel and their flight to send them to the UN to give their vote. So it's the same story. Big countries make all the rules. Well, when the law of ecocide, which is a change in the Rome Statute, when this comes up, we don't need to worry about the big countries, whether it's America, one vote, or whether it's the Maldives, one vote. We need to be getting as many countries to be able to say it. And there is huge traction that's already gaining. A lot of countries are really kind of starting to talk about this. So just to make sure that we as individuals are earth protectors, we don't just say I'm an earth protector, let's get that legal piece of paper and use it in court. And especially anyone that does direct action must know about it and spread this word. So we've spoken about the political, the legal, the economical, social change. Of course, we all need to get up and go to the protests and make, talk about what we're doing. We need a social uprising. We need to support our local farmers. We need to support our local communities. We need socially, we are social animals. And then there's the personal. It's like, many people say, oh, well, I'm just one person. I can't make a difference. But imagine if we actually did do all these things and those ripples that we don't know, the ripples that we cause as we change our money and get our friends and our families and our associates, and we start to show up and become aware of what are we buying, that pound in our pocket. Who do we give it to? Do we give it to Tesco's or do we give it to, a little local farmers market? How do we use our energy? So, there are all these solutions. And I think that we can often feel quite disempowered with this idea that I'm just one person, I can't really make a difference, which we can. And another amazing movement that, you know, I was the visionary behind, and now it has its own life, was to start an alliance, which we have the Southeast Climate Alliance. And in a conversation one day, there was all these different groups. There's a transition town groups, and there was the climate action groups, and all these little groups that felt quite small. And I said, well, what if all the groups came together and we formed an alliance? But we didn't want it to be just environmental groups. We were like, well, anybody that cares about the climate and ecological breakdown that we're currently facing, anyone that's taking action can be in this alliance. So that's environmental groups, social groups, and faith-based organizations, because churches also do loads of work for the environment. So it's like, well, actually, in a lot of faith groups, they have an environmental core to it. So by opening the alliance to be based on environmental, social, and faith-based organizations working on climate justice and climate action, we now have over 100 organizations. And that's, you know, everything from all the wildlife trusts, the CPREs, the Friends of the Earth, the Greenpeaces, the transition towns, the local XR groups, you know, the eco church groups. So we've created this alliance. And so please check it out, SE, Southeast Climate Alliance, and see how there's a lot of information to help local people. So whether you're interested in local campaigns or national campaigns, then, you know, rather than reinventing the wheel, what I just spoke at a couple of days ago was Dorset, and they had 100 people on their first meeting to start a Dorset climate action group. With all the small groups. And now the Southwest are wanting to start an alliance, and North Wales. So coming together under one umbrella where everyone can share good practice. So at the moment, what are they focusing on? It's coming up to election time. So, okay, there's going to be all these local candidates. Where do they stand and what are they going to vote on the climate and ecological breakdown? So that's what people in all our member organisations can all write to the local councillors, getting them to commit to taking action. So, you know, these are, you know, some of the ways that, you know, we can individually start to take action. There's no point not walking our talk. We have got to be the change we want to see in the world. And that does take, you know, us to start really thinking through where we shop, what we buy, what we do, what we talk about, you know, our day-to-day actions. You know, are we buying alfalfa sprouts in a little plastic pot when actually you could just easily sprout them yourself? You know, becoming empowered again to start to, you know, grow more of our own food and become, you know, much more aware of our actions. So I'm also been giving talks, most recently, as I spoke earlier, about biomimicry, which, whether people are architects or fashion designers or computer programmers or you name it, there is so much to learn from nature. So I've got a talk coming up on nature as teacher. And also I'm doing another talk, this is what biodiversity looks like. Because on my last trip down to Ecuador, I happened to get locked down, COVID struck, and I got stuck in the Los Cedros Biological Reserve, which is actually one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. So for over 5 months, I was blessed to be in a place where I could swim in the rivers and drink the water. And so there's a lot of talk about this word biodiversity, but do people actually know what biodiversity looks like? So that's the other presentation, which is a photographic journey of just like the amazingness that I photographed. I mean, this place has 800 varieties of moths. I mean, can we imagine, turn your light on at night, 800 different varieties of moths, over 400 varieties of orchids. I mean, the place was alive. So I really want, you know, people to visually have that experience of what biodiversity looks like. So, and then I also give other presentations about my work and all the projects which I have initiated. So, I mean, that's a little bit about me, and look at that, 12:30, there we are. I was asked to speak for half an hour. So that kind of gives you a bit of an understanding of who I am as an activist, what keeps me going, and also, you know, how one person can make a difference, and never underestimate the ripples that we all make by the actions that we choose. So Jonathan, I see you've come on. Have you got some questions going on there? I have not been able to see the chat.
Yeah, just first of all, thank you so much for that. Yeah, you've been very clear and to the point about individual things we can make, but also highlighting that other message about uniting and coming together and working together in groups. And that's kind of something that a lot of people have asked about in the chat to do with these alliances. One person has asked, Natasha has asked, about how can people find out about local alliances. You've talked about the Southeast. For people in the Southwest, for example, or elsewhere, finding out about them, starting them, and how smaller organisations can join similar alliances. Are you able to tell us a bit about that, please?
Yeah, well, of course, the Southeast Climate Alliance, if you're an organisation within East or West Sussex, Surrey, Kent or Hampshire, that's our area. We are covering the Southeast. The Southwest and North Wales, I've only just been in conversations with groups that are wanting to start up. There is no formal alliance that's been set up. And what it takes is, you know, individuals like the other night, the Dorset Alliance that has just been set up, and they're looking into, well, they could then form the Southwest Alliance. So there's nothing yet that's set up. They're just still talking about it. And so hopefully using, we call it Seeker, Seeking Solutions, the Southeast Climate Alliance, using that as a model, because, you know, we've already kind of worked it through. And if you go onto the website, you can kind of see the same information can be used in whatever bioregion. And by coming together in bioregions, it gives us a lot more, you know, people power. And there's some great examples, you know, from some of our members, like, you know, I remember one time Transition Town Worthing said, you know, we used to go and speak to the mayor or speak to the local MP, and we would say, hi, you know, we're Transition Worthing. And they'd be like, oh, yeah, okay. And now they say, we're Transition Worthing and a member of the Southeast Climate Alliance. And then they're like, oh, okay, because actually, I mean, I don't know how many members that we would have. Although we have over 100 organizations, some of them are quite big, like Friends of the Earth and their wildlife trusts and the CPREs, and so some of them are quite big established organizations, and others are smaller local climate action groups or small XR groups. Or so it's a totally non-party political. That's really important, that, you know, we can't represent the Green Party, we can't represent any party, it has to be totally a-party political. But I think using our model can be a basis for other alliances to form. And how I started it was I just contacted the local groups in the area and said, hey, do you want to come and have a meeting? Shall we create an alliance? And that happened, and now it's grown and grown. And so yeah, now I've passed on that plate because I'm focused on another thing. Actually, and I didn't get to speak about this, just quickly, following on from Nick, talking about valuing nature. Well, I have been on a massive journey about this, because being in Los Cedros, this incredible place, which was threatened by gold mining and copper mining, I was asked to go for the great deep ecologist John Seed and write a report about it. And all of a sudden, I got pulled into a court case where I spoke at the Constitutional Court on a rights of nature case. So what we had to do, and I was like, actually, the missing part of this is, whether we like it or not, which I really didn't at the time, how much could we value what's above ground as much as the gold and the value of it below ground? So I worked with a team of economists on the valuing of this, just the carbon, which was ridiculous. I mean, it's nothing to do with the valuing of biodiversity. It's the valuing of the natural ecosystem services that the trees provide in carbon sequestration. And there is a monetary market on carbon. So we could give it a market, and we could say, and that was my bit, bringing to the Constitutional Court, by the way, Los Cedros is worth $210 million on the carbon market. That's worth more than all the gold below it.
Mm-hmm.
And the looks on their faces was like, $210 million. Yeah, that's how much it's worth. And the world is moving with these carbon markets. And I kind of came around to this point of, I don't like it, but right now we have to do whatever we can to keep those forests standing. And whilst we have this craziness going on for tree planting, and it's like all these little saplings are being planted whilst we're cutting down primary forest.
Mm-hmm.
So we have got to actually prioritize the places of highest biodiversity. We need to save them however we do it. And so this is a new concept that I have, which is pay to breathe. Actually, what about, rather than just planting loads of saplings, we pay the indigenous people and the landowners that have primary forest, and they're having to cut it down because what they say to me is, I really want to send my kids to school. I need food. That's why we cut the forest down. So we have to find a way to move money to where the most important key biodiversity areas are, so we actually protect them. So that was a bit of a sub angle.
Oh, it's a nice aside, and there's an interesting thing that kind of struck me. Of you talked about your role as the translator for the Brazilian high priest and priestess. There's something of a, sorry?
Bolivian,
oh,
not
Bolivian.
Bolivia.
Sorry, Bolivian. There's an interesting kind of somewhat translating this value for nature into a language that the economists and those will understand in order for them to recognize that value of it.
And interesting, talking about the value, Sam, at the moment we're so limited, just able to talk about carbon.
Yeah.
And so I have been, I'm one of the kind of founding members of an organization called Rebalance.Earth, which is looking at how we value. And the first, it's an elephant and a whale that have been valued for the incredible ecosystem services which they offer. If you look into elephants and whales and how much carbon they sequester, it's a massive amount more than a tree. Yeah. So looking at the value of them in the services that they provide us with, and so therefore why we need to protect them. And so I've been asked many times, well, how do we value biodiversity? And we've really been looking into that. And so some of the scientists that I've been working with who are experts on biodiversity, they're like, well, hey, what we can do is we can just filter a bit of air, grind up a bit of soil, and then run it through a DNA sequencer. And with the technology that we have today, we can capture all the spores from different fungi, different pollen. And, although it's very rudimentary still, you would be able to show the variety of fungal and pot plants and, microbes. And so the more that there is in an area, obviously, the more biodiversity it has, the more value it has. And how would we look at it in the potential of future pharmaceuticals? Because most antibiotics, most medicines today come from either bacteria or fungi. So surely a biodiverse forest that has more species of fungi and bacteria is going to have much more potential for the future of medicine. So that's how we've also been looking at how do we fit into this economic paradigm to value nature.
Well, that's it. While it's kind of currently all seeing nature in terms of what it can do for us rather than sort of an intrinsic value of itself, it's had different ways of getting that message across. I was wondering as well, or curious, what you were talking about biomimicry earlier on in the talk, where you'd led on talking about things we can do individually. You'd earlier talking about to stay grounded and connected, and I wondered if you're able to talk a little bit more about that. What strikes me is that, particularly in our activism and in our direct action, while we still kind of see ourselves as a machine and keep on going and keep on going and keep on going until we burn out, wonder what lessons there are in the biomimicry for us in being active in change movements and bringing about change, and what lessons there can be then from nature for us in the work that we do.
Well, what always stands out for me, obviously, is the mycelial web below our feet, the wood wide web, how every blade of grass and every bush and every tree, it's like this connection that is going where they feed each other, they share nutrients, they share water, they share light. So this way of being able to connect and to share following and understanding how mycelium works. And say, people that haven't read great Sheldrake's book, I would highly recommend this, Entangled Lives, to just understand the amazingness of the kingdom of fungi and how much they have got to teach us. I mean, they are seriously evolved beings, and have got a huge amount to teach us. But also the incredible patience that nature has. I mean, you know, for everybody that's planted a carrot, you know that you plant this tiny, tiny little seed and nothing comes up, nothing comes up, nothing comes up. And it takes such a long time until that carrot is formed and we munch it down and it's gone within a few seconds. So, you know, nature has this sense of time and just patience, and it just how slow the blossoms are unfolding right now. They are unfolding, but it's, you know, you can't see it with your own eyes. It's the same with this movement of people are awakening to this need for, you know, an ecological new age, moving out of the industrial age into an ecological age. And 20 years ago, when I was banging on about plastic bags and rubbish and, you know, and stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, well, now that's kind of normal that we don't use plastic bags. And, you know, the world is changing. It is working out. It is, but it's just not, you know, it's not quick enough. The change is not quick enough. And I go between that sense of urgency myself, of feeling like, come on, but then reminding myself, nature doesn't work like that. Everything happens in its own time. And, you know, we are no different from nature. We also kind of have this idea that nature's out there. It's the forest, it's the wild spaces. And humans, well, we're in the cities and we're outside of nature. And we've created this artificial divide rather than realizing, actually, you know, there's not a lot of difference between us and the ants and the cockroaches and all the other species. And if we look at our human bodies, you know, and the eyelash mites on us and 1,000 different species of bacteria in our belly buttons, we are like a little earth. We have more non-human cells living in us and on us than actually human cells. So each one of us is like a little earth ourselves. So, you know, we can, rather than this, you know, there's humans sitting on the top of the pyramid, this strange idea that we somehow have dominion, instead that coming back into place of saying, well, actually, you know, I am no more important than a blade of grass. We're all doing our bit here at this time.
Absolutely lovely. Fantastic answer to that. Thank you so much. There's a lot of people saying exactly the same in the chat there. Bingo. Absolutely. People are agreeing with what you said there. We've had a number of people asking. They were really kind of grateful for your information about the ecocide law and the earth protectors. So I've seen that people have already responded to that in the chat, but just to let you know that you have kind of reached a number of people with that and got that message across. So really grateful for you sharing that and talking about that in here. We have also linked into your upcoming talks that you've got further up in the chat, but I just wondered if you could just let us know what your next talk is, please.
The next talk I'm doing is the Nature as Teacher, the Biomimicry, on the 1st. So I had kind of committed, you know, on the 1st of the month to be doing a talk. And so, yeah, that's the Nature as Teacher Biomimicry is the next one. Last one booked out. So, yeah, I had to like put sold out. So now I'm just limiting it to 100. So, and so, you know, I'll do more. But yeah, it just kind of worked out like that. So.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. I know there's, the link's just gone up again there to do with where you can find the upcoming talks. And, you know, we've heard a bit about biomimicry here then, so that will be a chance to hear some more.
And my website, there's 2 websites. So there's nicolapeel.com, which is, you know, they're both desperately out of date, but that talks more about me and my work that I have been, you know, doing in the Amazon. And also there's Eyes of Gaia, which is my very old website, which has a huge amount of environmental information on it. So, you know, the eyesofgaia.com site, you know, keeping an eye on the earth. So yes, that's on my to-do list to update that site, but it never, makes it to the top. And I don't want to ever take it down, because it does have a huge amount of information and links to more information on, ecocide or on biomimicry, or where you can kind of signpost it, or on ethical banks, or what can you do. So, that kind of listing is all on that. And that's another thing I really encourage local groups. Get your own to-do list. 10 top tips. And I really have been pushing XR groups to do this as well. It's like, lead the people, show them what to do. People want to take change. They just don't know what to do. But so I have a little flyer that I've made with these top 10 tips, change your bank account, change your energy to a renewable provider, sign up for the law of ecocide, have a conversation with your MP, buy organic food, shop local. Whatever your 10, like eat less meat, all of these really important things we have to do. And when you have a little flyer with your own group's logo on it, it's something real that when you're interacting, if ever we do really interact with real life people again, we'll have something to be able to pass out of, here we are, people, these are the steps that we all need to take.
Well, thank you so much for that, Nicola. You've been really clear throughout of direct steps that people can do, ways that we can kind of make change on an individual level, and talking about the ways that we can kind of unite together, as well as a lot more information that you've given on these topics like the biomimicry. So I'm really grateful that you've kind of shared those links there so people can find out more, because I can see that people are really keen to find out more. So many, many thanks for joining us today on here and sharing that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody, and have a good, and remember, get out in the elements and learn about them.